It felt like the epitome of security.
Yeah.
So
And
yeah, it's probably a sense of fear. So I just wanted to add something. It's probably a sense of fear too while you were probably fighting during your undergrad or during your degree. There was a sense of kind of like, oh, like I can't just give up my education and just go into full time fighting. You probably had a sense of, oh, I could do both
yeah, I
at a
did.
certain point, right?
I did, but at the same time, even as I was in school, there was a period of like 2 to 2.5 years where I was just fighting and training full time. Like
Mm.
that's all I was doing, and it was it was like me finally surrendering to the fact that yeah, this is what I would want to do full time. But I think when my brother fought, and then he had like a terrible injury, and my brother recovered from his injury, and he moved on with his life. But like with me in my head, he didn't just move on with his life. He overcame like a loss and he learned from it, and then he got better and moved on and he fought again. But like with me, I'd never seen like I'd never seen the ugly side of MMA. I was always on like the end of glory, like always on the end of winning. But I don't think I've had this conversation with Kenny before, but I never got a chance to see like the the hurt and like the defeat and the pain and like being in a hospital, going through rehab for like 6 months and having your jaw wired shut like that to me, and then seeing like when seeing my brother go through that pain, like I think just mentally it really stuck with me for a long time. But it stuck with me for a long time, but it didn't for him. He was in the moments he was in the hospital, he was already thinking like what his next move was going to be as he got out and how he was going to get better. But I remember looking in the hospital at my cousin that day as we were in the waiting room, and I was like, I think like this part of me just died. And then after that, I was like picking up the pieces of trying to like figure out what to do, and then I found myself going through like a business degree for a while, but always like questioning myself if this was like the right path.
Mm.
Did a lot of that have to do with even taking care of me during that process? Could you say that you seeing what it was like on that end of, okay, this is what happened to an MMA fighter, and now this is what it looks like in terms of the grieving process of being a sibling or being a loved one of that particular fighter? And I'll say this in detail only because, for those of you who don't know, KB murdered his opponents, being 4-0 undefeated, each and every single one of them, one being a decision. However, even that one was a war. Every single one of his opponents was a clean KO. So just in terms of that aspect, I think that's how heavy it could look of, okay, what does it look like after, that one fighter broke their ribs, that other fighter hurt their neck, so on and so forth.
Knowing what happens if you're on that side.
Yeah, so I mean, just as that of a
It's
little
like-
background, what was it like being the loved one? Did that have a big effect? Not just thinking of what it could have been like just as a fighter, but what it's like being the loved one of that fighter.
I think so. I mean, I always like looked at it like this was my negative mode of thinking initially when this happened, was that like when I was fighting, I never had I always fight with no emotions involved. And when Kenny was fighting, the emotions were amplified like times 1,000. Like it was so different than like when you were in there, because it's someone that you really really care about. And I think afterwards I had these like just recurring visions of like what it was like fighting myself, but I'd pull myself away from it, and I'd have like, for example, my last fight, it was a decision, but like the guy I was fighting had a laceration that opened up in his eye like from here to here, and it was like 3 layers deep below his skin, and he needed like something like 40 stitches to like close it up.
Oh wow.
And then his nose was like broken,
Damn.
and then his femur from like here to here was just like bruised deep to the bone from like eating leg kicks.
Jeez.
And he bled so much like all over me to the point to where like I remember when I got backstage and I started taking off my shorts, like not just my shorts, but I took off like my compression shorts underneath, and his like blood was like in my ass, like it was like it was like on my like it was like on my groin, like it was like all pooled up like on me, like, and I'm like showering and I'm just like I'm not even really thinking about this because I was just thinking of it like a job. But then like when you're taking off your wraps and everything, and like the dust is starting to settle and you realize like kind of what you've done, like what you've done to another human being, like it started to settle with me after my brother fought, like this is what we do to people.